If you look at a rental advert in England today, there is a number on it that means something different to what it meant 4 months ago. It looks the same. Same font, same portal, same figure per calendar month. But as of the 1st of May 2026, that number is a legal ceiling. Not a guide, not an opening position. A landlord or letting agent who asks for more than it, encourages more than it, or accepts more than it can be issued a civil penalty by the local council of up to £7,000. Repeat it within 5 years and it goes higher. Which sounds like an unambiguously good thing. And in one specific way, it is. But the ban has been running for 3 months now, and what it changed is not quite what most people expected. To see why, you have to understand what it actually removed, and what it could not touch. So let me tell you where we are going. First, what rental bidding was, and why it was worth banning. Then what the new rules actually say, including 2 parts almost nobody has noticed. Then, what happens to a market when you take away its pricing mechanism but leave its shortage in place? And finally, why this is a much harder problem than a bad practice being stopped. Let's start with what was happening before. If you rented in a British city at any point in the last 5 years, you will recognise this. A flat is advertised at, say, £1,400 a month. You book a viewing, so do 30 other people, and the viewings are stacked 15 minutes apart, so you pass the previous group on the stairs. And then somewhere in the process, usually from the agent, usually not in writing, comes the suggestion. There is a lot of interest. If you want to stand out, you might consider offering above the asking rent. So you offer £1,500, and you find out later that somebody offered £16. That is rental bidding. And notice the structure of it, because the structure is the problem rather than the price. The advertised rent was never the price. It was the reserve. It was the number that got you through the door and into a competition you were not told you had entered until you were already in it. You cannot budget against that. You cannot compare 2 properties against it. And you cannot walk away in any meaningful sense, because every other property is running the same auction. The government's stated aim was to crack down on the minority of landlords who encouraged this, and it was careful to say that most landlords did not. That is probably fair, but the practice does not require most landlords to do it. It only requires enough of them that a tenant cannot assume the advertised rent is the rent. So, from the 1st of May, the rules are these. When a property is advertised or offered in writing, it must include the exact rent, a specific figure. A price range is not allowed. And that applies across every form of written advertising. The property portals, printed adverts, social media posts, emails, text messages, direct messages. The one exception is a to let board outside the property, which does not have to carry the figure. The landlord and the agent then must not ask for, encourage, or accept an offer above that published rent, and that includes an unsolicited offer. If a tenant, entirely off their own bat, offers £200 a month more, it cannot be accepted. Enforcement runs through the local council. It can ask for evidence of the advertised rent, the tenancy agreement, or a statement from the landlord or agent. If it concludes bidding took place, it can impose that civil penalty of up to £7,000 for a first offence. Now, there are 2 things in the new rules that get much less attention than the bidding ban, and both of them matter more than they look. The first is that there is nothing preventing a landlord accepting a lower offer. The ceiling is one directional. You cannot go above the advertised rent. You can absolutely go below it. Which means in a market where a property is not letting, the advertised figure can come down, and negotiation downwards is entirely legal. That is a genuinely useful thing to know if you are renting, and almost nobody does. The second is a change to how much money you can be asked for up front. Under the amended rules, a landlord or agent cannot require or accept any payment of rent before the tenancy agreement is entered into. Once it is signed and before the tenancy starts, they can require up to 1 month's rent or 28 days for shorter rental periods. And once the tenancy has started, terms requiring rent in advance of the agreed due date cannot be enforced. A tenant can still voluntarily pay more in advance, but only after moving in, and it cannot be required or made a condition. Now, this one is more complicated than it first appears, and I want to be honest about it rather than cheer. Being asked for 6 or 12 months rent up front was a genuine barrier. If you do not have several £1,000s spare, you are simply excluded from those properties. And it was a very effective filter for keeping out anybody without savings or family money. So capping it is a real protection. But it was also, for some people, the way in. If you were self-employed with a regular income, or new to the country with no UK credit history, or a student without a British guarantor, or somebody whose references would not survive contact with a referencing agency, offering rent in advance was how you compensated. It was expensive and it was unfair that you had to. It was also, sometimes, the only card you had. Take the card away and the protection is real. So is the exclusion. If that shape sounds familiar, it is because I have described it twice on this channel already. In the film about Buy Now Pay Later, an affordability requirement protects people from unaffordable credit, and projections suggested it could exclude up to 30% of users who keep the need and lose the cheap way of meeting it. In the film about phone contracts, a transparency rule made prices clearer and left the cheapest customers facing the largest percentage rise. Here it is again, same structure, different market. But that is not the main thing about the bidding ban, and here is where the whole thing turns over. A ban removes a mechanism. It does not remove the condition that produced the mechanism. The condition in the English rental market is that in many places there are substantially more people looking for somewhere to live than there are places available. That has not changed. No provision of this Act builds a single home. So imagine a flat advertised at £1,400. 30 people view it, all 30 want it, all 30 can, at a stretch, pay £1,400. The landlord can only let it to one. Before the 1st of May, that question was settled by price. Ugly, stressful and exclusionary, but settled by a number, and the number was visible to everyone taking part. Now price cannot settle it. The rent is fixed at £1,400 and every applicant is offering exactly £1,400 because that is the only offer the law permits. So what decides? Something else does. It has to. 30 applicants and one flat is not a problem that goes away because one tiebreaker was removed. And the something else is not published anywhere. It is whose employment contract looks most stable, whose references come back fastest, who has a guarantor and where that guarantor lives and what they earn, who has a clean credit file, who seemed easiest at the viewing, who the agent thinks will be least trouble. Some of that is legitimate. A landlord assessing whether an applicant can actually pay the rent is doing something reasonable, and referencing exists for a reason. But notice what has happened to the decision. Price is a terrible allocation mechanism in a shortage for all the obvious reasons. It is also the only one that is legible. You know what you offered. You know what you lost by. You can work out afterwards why you did not get it. What replaces it is discretion. And discretion is invisible. Nobody publishes their criteria. Nobody tells you which of the 30 you came in. You do not find out whether it was your contract type or your credit file or something about you that would be unlawful to consider. The Act does try to address part of this. It bans discrimination against tenants receiving benefits and against tenants with children, which were two of the most common and most damaging filters. That is a real and significant reform. But you cannot legislate a preference for the applicant with the most reassuring payslip. That is not discrimination in the legal sense. It is judgment, and judgment is what is left when price has been taken away. If you are finding this useful, that is what this channel is. Every figure from a named source, working out why things cost what they cost and who ends up paying. Subscribing is how you get the next one. There is a second thing the ban cannot control, and the industry flagged it immediately. If the advertised rent is now a ceiling rather than a floor, the incentive is to set the ceiling higher. Under the old system, a landlord could advertise at £1,400 and let the market push it up. Under the new one, whatever they advertise is the most they can get. So the rational move, if you expect demand, is to advertise at the number you were hoping to reach anyway. A survey by Goodlord, a letting software company, so a commercial source rather than an official one, and worth weighing accordingly, found that 1 in 5 landlords said they would compensate by advertising at a higher initial rent, anticipating negotiation downwards. 1 in 5 is not most, and the downward negotiation is genuinely available now, which is the counterweight. But it does illustrate the general point, which is that when you change the rules about how a price may be arrived at, without changing how high it may be, the price tends to re-emerge in whatever form the new rules permit. Now, I want to be careful not to slide into the argument that the ban was pointless, because I do not think that at all. Something important did change, and it is worth stating plainly. The advertised rent is now true. That is not a small thing. Before, the number on the listing was an invitation to a competition you could not see the terms of. Now it is the figure you will pay. You can budget against it. You can compare properties by it. You can walk into a viewing knowing what the outcome costs. And the specific harm of bidding, people offering more than they could afford, under pressure, in a room with 30 other people, has been removed. Some of those people would have got the flat and then struggled to keep it. That is a real harm, and it has stopped. There is also a route to challenge a rent that is too high. A tenant can apply to the first tier tribunal, and the application fee for appealing a rent increase is £47, with no hearing fee, deliberately set low to keep the route open to people under financial pressure. Rent increases themselves are now limited to once a year. So the Act is not toothless. It has changed real things, and the wider reforms it sits alongside, the end of Section 21 no-fault evictions, the Ombudsman, the property database, the Decent Home Standard, are the most significant changes to renting in England since 1988. But here is what I would take from it, and it is the thing that generalises. There are two different problems in any shortage, and they look like the same problem. The first is how the scarce thing is allocated. Auctions, queues, lotteries, discretion. Rules can change this, and this Act has changed it, and the new arrangement is fairer than the one it replaced in at least one measurable way. The second is that the thing is scarce. Rules cannot change this. No allocation mechanism, however well designed, increases the number of flats. And almost all political energy goes into the first problem, because the first problem is visible, has villains, and can be solved by an Act of Parliament in a way that produces a headline. The second problem takes a decade, costs a fortune, and belongs to whoever is in office when it fails. So we get better and better at deciding who does not get the flat. If you are renting in England right now, 3 practical things are worth knowing, and they follow directly from the rules rather than from anything I think. The advertised rent is a ceiling. If an agent suggests you might stand out by offering above it, that is not a negotiating tip. It is something the council can fine them up to £7,000 for, and you can report it. You can offer below. Nothing in the ban prevents a landlord accepting less, and a property that has been sitting on a portal for 6 weeks is one where that conversation is worth having. And you cannot be required to pay more than 1 month's rent in advance before the tenancy starts. If you are being asked for 6, that is not how it works anymore. None of which fixes the underlying thing. The number on the advert is honest now. That is genuinely better than it was. It is just not the same as there being enough flats.